The temp agency sent a stranger to cover a Saturday shift in my failing bakery, and by 9 in the morning, watching her hands fold dough she had no business knowing how to fold, I had to set down my coffee and ask her, in a voice that came out rougher than I meant it to, who on earth had taught her to bake like that. She told me she'd taught herself. She said it fast, and she did not look up from the dough, and something about the careful way she avoided my eyes while she said it made the hair go up on the back of my neck, because I had heard that exact fold, that exact turn of the wrist, only one other time in my entire life, from a girl I had not seen in 14 years. A girl I had sent away myself, out of my own kitchen, on the worst night of a bad year, believing at the time it was the only decent thing left I could do for her. I did not say her name out loud, not yet. I was too afraid I was wrong, and more afraid, if I'm honest, that I was right. But before I tell you what happened when I finally said it, do me one quick favor. If you've ever spent years wondering what became of someone you couldn't keep, hit that subscribe button right now. This whole channel is built for the people who come back around, when you least expect it, to let you know you mattered. Go on. I'll wait. Now let me back all the way up. Because to understand why a stranger's hands stopped my heart cold, you first have to understand an empty half of a bed, a frightened runaway with flour under her fingernails, and the worst decision of my entire life, made for what I believed, at the time, were all the right reasons. My name is Walter Kessler. I am 51 years old, and I have owned a small neighborhood bakery for almost 30 years, a place my late wife, Ruth, and I built together from nothing when we were young and had more hope than money. Ruth died 6 years ago, cancer, slow and cruel the way it usually is, and since then, it has been me and our shop, and, most days, more grief than a man knows what to do with, folded into the bread, the same way you fold in the butter, invisible, once it's baked but there in every single bite, if you know to look for it. I am raising my grandson. His name is Sam. He's 11, and he's been mine to raise since my daughter, his mother, lost her own battle with addiction 3 years ago. A fight I watched her lose slowly over most of her adult life, in a story too long and too painful to lay out fully here. Sam is quiet and careful in a way that breaks my heart a little every day, an old soul in a young body, and he spends his afternoons doing homework on a flour-dusted stool at the back of my shop, because I cannot afford real childcare and would not want it anyway. He is, without any competition, the reason I get up every morning. The shop's finances tell me not to bother. That, right there, is most of the story. Everything else is just details. Now I need to tell you about the winter I sent a girl named Della away, because nothing that happened in my shop that Saturday makes sense without it. It was 14 years ago, the worst winter of my life, for reasons that had nothing to do with the weather. Ruth had just gotten her first cancer diagnosis, the one we thought, for a while, we'd beaten. Our daughter, still years from her own worst troubles but already showing the first cracks that would eventually swallow her, was cycling in and out of our house in ways that kept us both constantly afraid. And into the middle of all that chaos, one bitter January night, a 15-year-old girl showed up at the back door of my bakery, in clothes too thin for the cold, asking if she could sleep in the alcove behind the ovens where it was warm, just for one night. Her name was Della. She'd run from a group home 2 towns over, the 3rd or 4th placement in a system that had failed her over and over since she was small, and she had nowhere else, and something in her thin, exhausted, defiant face reminded me so much of my own daughter, who was struggling in her own different way at the very same time, that I could not make myself turn her out into that cold. I let her stay, not just that one night. I want you to understand, I did not do this lightly or foolishly. I called the authorities, properly, the very next morning, and worked with them, and for reasons involving overcrowded systems and a group home willing to have her back, but a girl utterly unwilling to return. An arrangement was eventually approved, temporary and closely supervised, for Della to stay with us in the little apartment above the shop, while a longer-term plan got sorted out. She worked in the bakery for her keep, insisted on it, said she didn't want charity, and it turned out, almost immediately, that she had a gift. I have taught a great many people to bake in 30 years, and I have never, before or since, seen hands learn as fast as Della's did. Within weeks, she was doing things instinctively that took most apprentices years to master. The exact pressure for a laminated dough, the precise moment a caramel turns from amber to burnt, a particular fold I use for my signature brioche, one I invented myself and had never taught to anyone outside my own family, that she picked up after watching me do it exactly twice. She had, I came to believe, a genuine gift, rare and real, sitting inside a scared, angry, brilliant kid that the world had mostly given up on. I remember one evening in particular, closing up together, just the two of us, the shop dark except for the light over the ovens, and Della asked me, out of nowhere, why I bothered teaching her things properly, instead of just having her do the simple grunt work most temporary help got handed. I told her the truth, that I could see, plainly, that she had a real gift, and that a gift like that deserved to be taught right the first time, because bad habits learned early are the hardest to unlearn later. She didn't say anything for a long moment, just kept wiping down the counter, and then she said, very quietly, that nobody had ever called anything about her a gift before, only ever a problem. I have thought about that sentence more times than I can count in the 14 years since. For 4 months, that winter into spring, Della lived above my bakery, and something in our house, in the middle of Ruth's illness and our daughter's chaos, steadied around her, the way a difficult dough steadies once you finally get the hydration right. Ruth adored her. My daughter, strange as it sounds, seemed calmer, with another struggling kid in the house, like she wasn't so alone in it. And Della, for her part, bloomed in a way I don't think anyone, including her, expected. She started talking about culinary school. She started, for the first time in her whole documented history, sleeping through the night. And then everything fell apart at once, the way it does. Ruth's cancer, briefly in remission, came roaring back, worse, requiring aggressive treatment and constant care that consumed every hour and every dollar we had. My daughter, in the middle of that same terrible spring, relapsed badly, violently, in ways that put our whole household in real danger for a period of weeks. Danger I am not going to detail here, because it isn't only my story to tell. And the caseworker overseeing Della's placement, watching a household falling apart in real time, made the only responsible call available to her. She told me, gently but firmly, that given everything happening in my home, she could not in good conscience leave a vulnerable 15-year-old in it, that Della needed to be moved to a properly resourced, stable placement, while I dealt with my wife's illness and my daughter's crisis. I agreed with her. I want to be honest about that, because it matters to everything that came after. I did not fight to keep Della, not really, not the way maybe I should have. I looked at my dying wife, my unraveling daughter, and a 15-year-old girl who deserved, desperately, a stable home I no longer had any way of providing, and I made the decision that felt, at the time, like the only responsible thing left to do. I told Della she had to go. I remember that conversation more clearly than almost anything else in my life. I remember her standing in the middle of the kitchen, flour still on her apron from the batch of brioche we'd made together that very morning, and I remember the look on her face, not the anger I might have braced for, but something worse, a quiet, resigned collapse, like she'd fully expected this all along and was only surprised it had taken 4 whole months to happen. She said, "Everyone always sends me somewhere else eventually." And I did not have an answer for that, because it was true. and because I was, in that moment, one more adult proving her right. She left 3 days later, transferred to a placement in another county, and within the month, for reasons I never learned, she ran again, and this time, she vanished from the system's records entirely, at least as far as anyone would ever tell me. A 15-year-old girl, swallowed by the exact machinery that had failed her over and over before she ever knocked on my back door. I spent 14 years wondering what happened to her. I want you to understand that. Every batch of brioche I have folded since that spring, every single time, some part of me has thought of her hands doing it faster and cleaner than mine, and wondered, with a guilt I never fully outran, whether sending her away had been the responsible choice I told myself it was, or whether I had simply been one more person in a long line of people who let Della down exactly when she needed someone not to. Continued in the next part. So on that Saturday morning, 14 years later, watching a stranger's hands fold brioche dough with a fold I had invented myself and taught to exactly one person outside my own family, I could not make my mouth work for a long moment. I finally managed to ask her, straight out, without dancing around it, "What's your name?" She told me it was Claire, not Della, and she said it steady, practiced, like a name she'd said 1,000 times, and for a second, I thought I'd lost my mind, that grief and a hard year in the shop had finally made me start seeing ghosts in strangers' hands. But I looked at her more carefully, past the different name, past hair a different color than I remembered, past 14 years that change a face considerably between 15 and 29, and I found, on the inside of her left wrist, exactly where I knew it would be, a small, faded burn scar, shaped almost like a comma, from an oven rack she'd grabbed bare-handed in her very first week in my kitchen, laughing it off, refusing to let it slow her down, wearing it, she'd told me at the time, like a badge of honor. "Della," I said, not a question this time. Her hands went still on the dough, and for a long moment neither of us said anything at all, the whole bakery gone quiet around us. My grandson Sam looking up, confused, from his stool in the back, sensing that something enormous had just happened, between two adults he didn't understand yet. "I go by Claire now," she finally said, very quietly, still not looking at me. "I have for a long time. It felt easier to build a whole new life under a name nobody in the system had already given up on." "Why are you here?" I asked. "Why now? And why like this? Working a Saturday temp shift, not telling me who you were?" And Della, or Claire, whatever name she was carrying that day, finally looked up at me, and her eyes were wet, and she said, "I've been coming into this neighborhood for almost a year, Walter. I've watched this shop from across the street more than once, trying to work up the nerve to walk in as myself. I heard, through people who still know people, that you were struggling, that the shop might not make it much longer, and I couldn't stand the thought of it just quietly closing, of you never knowing what happened to me, of me never getting to say the thing I've needed to say for 14 years. So when I saw the temp agency had a listing for your shop this week, I took it under my working name, because I honestly didn't know if I could get the words out if I had to say them to your face straight off. I thought maybe if I just showed you my hands first, you'd understand before I had to explain." I had to sit down. I actually had to pull a stool over and sit, right there in the middle of a Saturday morning rush I could not afford to be ignoring, because 14 years of guilt were finally standing in front of me with flour on her hands, and I did not know where to begin. "I have thought about you every single day," I told her. "I have wondered, every day, whether I did right by you, or whether I was just one more person who gave up on you when it got hard. I have never forgiven myself for how that conversation went, for how quiet you got, for that thing you said, about everyone always sending you somewhere else." Della, Claire, whoever she was standing in front of me that morning, shook her head slowly, and something in her face, tired and old beyond her years, softened into something gentler. "Walter," she said, "I need you to hear something, and I need you to actually let yourself believe it, because I think you've been carrying the wrong story for 14 years. She wiped her eyes with the back of a floury hand. "You did not fail me. You were the first adult in my entire life who let me stay somewhere because you wanted me there, not because a check arrived for it. You taught me the one thing I turned out to be actually good at, the thing that saved my whole life afterward, and you did it in 4 months, while your wife was dying and your daughter was falling apart, and you still found the patience to show a scared kid how to fold a brioche properly. When that caseworker made you send me back, that wasn't you giving up on me. That was you being an honest man in an impossible situation, choosing your dying wife and your daughter over a kid who had no legal claim on you at all. And I need you to know, I have never once, not for one single day in 14 years, blamed you for that choice. I blamed the system. I blamed my own parents, way back at the start of all this. I never once blamed you." "Then why did it hurt so much?" I asked, watching you say, "Everyone always sends you somewhere else." "Because it was true, about everyone else," she said. "But you were the one who gave me something none of the others gave me first. You gave me 4 months where I got to matter, where I got to be good at something, where an adult looked at my hands and saw a gift instead of a problem. When I ran again after the new placement, I didn't run because I'd given up. I ran because I finally believed, because of you, that I was worth something, and I decided I was done letting a broken system decide what happened to me. I found a woman, eventually, a pastry chef who ran a small culinary program for kids aging out of foster care. No strings, real training, and I walked in there, already knowing how to fold a brioche the exact way you'd taught me, and she told me, on my very first day, that she'd never seen a beginner's hands move like that. I told her a baker taught me once, for 4 months, a long time ago, and that it had been the best 4 months of my whole childhood. She was crying openly now, and so, I will admit, was I. Everything I've built since then, Walter, every single thing, started with your hands showing my hands that fold. You didn't send me away into nothing. You sent me away with the one thing that turned out to matter most. I learned, over the rest of that day, the shape of what Della, now Claire Voss, had built in the 14 years since I'd last seen her. She had gone through that culinary program, excelled, earned a scholarship to a serious pastry school on the strength of a portfolio that, she told me, still included photographs of the very first brioche we'd ever made together. She had worked her way up through professional kitchens with the same ferocious, self-taught speed she'd shown me as a 15-year-old, and had, in her late 20s, built and now ran a genuinely successful artisan bakery company, several locations across 2 states, along with a foundation, funded largely out of her own success, that provided culinary training and paid apprenticeships specifically for kids aging out of foster care, kids exactly like she had been, kids the system tends to release into the world, with nothing. She showed me a photograph, actually, on her phone that she'd kept all these years, of the 2 of us standing in front of this very counter, flour on both our aprons, her 15-year-old face caught mid-laugh at something I'd apparently said, a photograph I did not even remember Ruth taking. "I've looked at this more times than I could tell you," she said. "On bad days when the business was young and everything felt impossible, I'd pull this up and remind myself that once, in a kitchen exactly like the one I was trying to build, somebody believed I was worth teaching properly." She closed the photo and looked up at me. "That's a heavier thing to carry than you probably ever realized you were handing a scared 15-year-old. I built that foundation," she said, "because of you, whether you meant to teach me that lesson or not. I wanted every kid like me to get what I got in this kitchen, even if it was only 4 months. Somebody seeing what they're actually capable of, instead of just what they cost. Now, Here is the part of the story I most need you to hear, because it's the part that matters most. Claire offered, that very day, to simply write a check, enough to clear every debt threatening my shop and set it fully right. And I understood exactly why she wanted to. And I understood, too, that some part of her needed to do it, needed to finally pay back what she believed she owed. But I turned it down, gently, and I told her why. "I don't want you rescuing my shop out of guilt," I said, "because you don't owe me anything, Della. You never did. If you hand me a check today, then for the rest of my life, every time I look at this shop, I'm going to remember it as the day I got bailed out by a girl I once had to send away. And that is not the story I want either one of us carrying. I would rather close this shop honestly than have it saved by somebody paying off a debt that was never actually owed." Claire looked at me for a long moment, and then, slowly, she smiled. The first real, unguarded smile I'd seen from her all day. "Then let me offer you something else," she said. "Not charity. A partnership. My company is always looking for authentic, established neighborhood locations to bring into our family, under their own name, keeping the original owner running the shop exactly as they always have, with our resources and distribution behind them instead of in front of them. I'm not offering to save you. I'm offering to invest in a genuinely excellent bakery, run by a genuinely excellent baker, because it's a smart business decision, and because I would be proud, professionally and personally, to have my own company's name standing behind the man who taught me the fold that built my whole career. That's not a gift, Walter. That's me recognizing real talent and wanting in on it. Take it as that, or don't take it at all." I took it as that. We signed the partnership 2 months later, and my little shop is still mine, still bears my name over the door, still run exactly the way Ruth and I built it 30 years ago. But it is steady now, genuinely steady, for the first time in years, and it will be there for Sam if he ever wants it. In a way, it likely would not have been otherwise. Sam, for his part, has more or less adopted Claire as an honorary aunt, and she comes by most weeks now, not to check on her investment, but because, she told me once, this kitchen is the only place in the world that ever felt entirely like home to her before she built one of her own. I watch the two of them sometimes, Sam on his stool doing homework, Claire showing him, patiently, the exact fold that started her whole life over, and I think about 14 years of guilt I did not need to carry quite so heavily, and about Ruth, who would have loved, more than almost anything, to see this particular circle finally close. There's a version of this where I take the check, quietly, gratefully, and let the shop be saved without ever fully facing what it meant. And there is no version of that where I get to watch Claire and Sam at that counter together, both of them people I once thought I might have failed, both of them proof that sometimes the kindest, hardest thing you do for someone doesn't look like rescue at the time. I picked the true accounting over the easy rescue. I'd pick it every single time. So let me leave you with this tonight. A man spent 14 years believing he had failed a frightened girl who needed him to stay, when in truth, the 4 months he gave her, imperfect and unchosen as their ending was, turned out to be the exact foundation her entire life was built on. He never knew, all those years, that the thing he thought was a failure was actually the thing that saved her. Sometimes the good we do doesn't announce itself. It just walks quietly out the door and finds its way, years later, back to say thank you, in a language only your own 2 hands would recognize. So here is what I honestly want to know from you tonight. Is there someone you helped, once, for a short time, under hard circumstances, that you've spent years wondering about, wondering if it was enough, wondering if you failed them? I want you to consider, tonight, that the short, imperfect thing you gave them might have mattered far more than you ever let yourself believe. And if you're the one who was helped, briefly, by someone who thinks they let you down, go find them. Tell them what it actually meant. They may be carrying a guilt they never needed to carry at all. Tell me your story down in the comments. I read every single one, and tonight yours is the one I most want to hear. And if this reached you, if you believe, like I've come to believe, that a short season of real kindness can quietly build an entire life, then do me one small favor before you go. Subscribe so the next story finds you too. Leave a like so somebody else carrying old guilt finds the courage to ask what really happened. And go find the person you're still wondering about. I'll be right here, reading every word.